Welcome in, ladies and gentlemen, to 3 Tech Takeout, our Monday evening live show where we get to kind of talk about some extra thoughts from week 8 and preview our midweek matchups. I'm here with both the other 3 Tech co-hosts, co-owners, Garrett Turney, Mitch Mason. Gentlemen, you were around the world this weekend, around the country, and got to watch a little bit of football, got to catch up on football the last couple of days. It's great to have you guys back. I'm really excited to hear about your thoughts on week 8 as we kick off this show tonight. But first of all, I guess just welcome back. It's great to see you guys. I feel like I haven't seen y'all in a long time.
I know it has been a minute. I was up in Big 10 country. Garrett, I guess, was in Big 12 country. And yeah, we both had our respective weekends. I got to bet the over under on wedding speeches from drunk father-in-laws. That was entertaining. It was electric as the Hawks were trying to come back against Michigan State, Iowa State, 2 tables down. They're very well represented. Their comeback was memorable. It was an interesting way to take in college football from table 11.
Yeah, I too was near some, probably drunk father-in-laws, but nobody was claiming them, and it wasn't necessarily a wedding scenario. Just I'm sure they had families that were ashamed of them somewhere. Just a fun weekend overall. Is brother's bachelor party, so we were up in a little establishment north of the Red River here. So technically Big 12, but also kind of SEC country. It's all kind of weird over there now. I don't really know what to call it. Was a really fun little situation. I'll tell you this much. Sitting at a bar at this place and being able to look to my left and see nothing but Texas fans and to my right and see nothing but Oklahoma fans, and getting to watch the ending of that Texas-Georgia game kind of in the middle right there, getting to look left and right and hearing the cheers and the boos and everything else. And man, there's some excellent trash talk happening on Saturday night. So that was a kind of a fun experience there. So it was a nice weekend overall.
I love being in those neutral site areas. That was me a couple weeks ago for Red River. I found a bar and had Oklahoma fans on one side, Texas fans on the other. And I was only there for the beginning before it got too crazy and too much of a blowout. So it was a fun little back and forth. I'm sure those Oklahoma fans weren't having a good time by the middle of the second quarter. But yeah, guys, if you're listening to this on the podcast side, first of all, yes, we do have a Monday show. It is every Monday, live around 7 or 7:30 p.m. Central on YouTube, Twitter, and Instagram. We're putting it on the podcast platform this week for you guys to check out. Hopefully, you'll come back and check us out live. And if you're watching live on YouTube, Twitter, Instagram, throw your comments in wherever that receptacle is on your app of choice. We'd love to respond and get the conversation started with you guys. But as our appetizer tonight here on 3 Tech Takeout, I would like to just let you guys have the floor, kind of ping pong back between Mitch and Garrett. They did not get to share their thoughts, at least in the podcast medium. I saw you guys were very active on Twitter and very active on our group text this weekend. But once you guys have a chance to share your thoughts on week 8, the week that was in college football, obviously some seismic results around the country. None greater than Georgia knocking off number 1 Texas in Austin. Of course, Mitch, we'll start with you. Take it wherever you want. If you want to start in Austin, if you want to start somewhere else, just your floor.
Well, I definitely.
And Mitch is done and down. So, Garrett, I will pass it over to you as Mitch will get his internet figured out. We'll bump him from coverage here. Oh, is he back?
Oh, no, he's back.
I am back. That was terrible timing.
It was awesome timing.
That was fantastic. That was so good.
Yeah, if you're on the podcast medium, Mitch's internet cut out, and I'm stalling for him a little bit more. It looks like he's back now. But Mitch, we'll try this again. What caught your eye in week 8? And now he's muted. So this is even better.
Strike 3.
This is we're off and running tonight.
Am I still muted? There's no way.
No, you're good
back now. We can hear you. America can hear you.
I mean,
we're on pins and needles to hear your week 8 thoughts.
Talk about the wheels falling off. I was wrong about Texas. All right. I told you that they were going to win by 14-17. I believed that the offense was going to be able to come out, that Steve Sarkisian was going to do what he always does. He scripts excellent starts against great competition, and he has a way of throwing that first punch. they got punched, and not just once, but repeatedly. Quinn Ewers got punched over and over again. Arch came in, didn't do much to help the offense. The running game really couldn't get going. I think they had like 37 yards of offense on the ground. They converted 1 third down all night in the fourth quarter. I mean, it was just a bludgeoning from the Georgia defense. And so that was my takeaway, was that the Dogs defense won this game. Texas's offense lost this game. The Longhorns defense stood up when it absolutely needed to. And it's not like Carson Beck had a great game, but that Georgia defense, listening to Kirby Smart get to play the underdog all week long, that was exactly what the Bulldogs needed to get back on track.
Yeah, Kirby loves being an underdog. We saw that with Darth Kirby at the end there, where the lighting just made him look like a Sith Lord. That was fantastic. Mitch, do you think that game could have gotten even further away from Texas? That I left thinking they were lucky to only lose by 15.
Yeah, I mean, Georgia's offense did absolutely nothing. Credit to the Texas defense for forcing turnovers right back. I mean, for a minute there in the first half, it was, oh my gosh, who's going to touch the ball last, that they might not turn it over. But Carson Beck was pressured. He looked uncomfortable. The Texas secondary, I thought, played well. But there's no doubt that Georgia, if they'd gotten anything going in that first half, they could have burned Austin to the ground by halftime. And I think that's something that the Bulldogs absolutely have to clean up going forward. They played about as perfectly on defense as I think you could. Without that, maybe Texas loses by just one score. Maybe this is a field goal game, something like that. But Texas clearly needed some breaks to go their way. They got one with the officiating in a bizarre sequence, Trey, that you talked about on Sunday morning. But other than that, it was all Bulldogs in Austin.
Gary, this was the top story of the weekend, so I'll let you get your quick take in here. But what was your just very quick thought on Texas, Georgia?
Yeah, I kind of had a couple. So first off, Texas is a good football team. Nobody needs to doubt that. They're a good football team. But I'm going to stop at the word good, right? That's what I'm willing to do. They played a good football team in Georgia. And sometimes when good football teams play each other, they split those games, right? There's a lot of scenarios where Texas wins this game. There's also other ways that Georgia could have won this game. But I think it's kind of obvious at this point that, there was a massive overreaction. And that there has been up to this point in the season, a massive overreaction to what we had been seeing out of Texas. And we had been crowning, and there are others in sports media crowning them the new Georgia. And I understand people like to walk back stuff that they maybe didn't say, but their thumbnail artist put up there. But you can't start saying things like that in, 6 games of a season or 7 games of a season. You can't start crowning people the new Georgia when, Georgia's got a couple championships in the last few years. Like, let's pump the brakes a little bit on a good start against not a whole lot of competition, because right now Texas still doesn't have a great win over a very good team. They lost a game to Georgia that there's a lot of scenarios where they win that one, right? If Trey Wisner gets going a little bit better in that game, maybe they run the football, can balance their offense a little bit, get the pressure off of Quinn, and then they're off to the races. If Quinn plays a little bit better, if they don't switch to Arch in the middle, and maybe that had something to do with confidence. I don't know what it was, but something about that game didn't go well for the Texas Longhorns and did go well for the Georgia Bulldogs. But there's also another scenario in this where, maybe Carson Beck doesn't throw 3 picks and fewer than 200 yards. Maybe, some of those longer fields that they didn't get a chance to drive end up getting driven. And so they score a bunch more points, but also milk more clock and give Texas fewer opportunities to get their offense on the field. There's a lot of ways this game could go. These are 2 good teams. Neither of these teams strike me as particularly elite. I don't think you saw an elite team on that football field on Saturday night. Neither of these teams played a fantastic game, right? When you watched for a couple weeks ago talk Alabama, Georgia, those looked like 2 very good teams by the end of that game. Neither of these teams looked overly dominating. You can credit the defenses, and they played very well, but neither of these teams looked like, oh, these are the massive over-the-top dominating teams. There's no flaws. There's no gaps. There's no problems with these teams. These are 2 very good football teams, but that's where I'm going to stop. I'm not going to overreact to this. I could see either of these teams making it to Atlanta. I could see either of these teams winning the whole thing if everything goes right. But neither of these teams is a finished product right now, and I think that was obvious.
We're talking Texas, Georgia. If you're just joining us, that might be the Carson Beck that we get this year. I'm starting to get really concerned about his propensity to turn the football over. On the other side, Mitch, Quinn Ewers looked shell-shocked. And there's that viral meme of him and Arch on the sideline just looking like, man, welcome to the SEC, right?
Mm-hmm.
What are your thoughts on the state of Quinn Ewers and what Texas fans should expect from him going forward?
Listen, Quinn's a good quarterback. I don't think he's the first-round quarterback that many build him as coming into this season. And the reason that I point to is his continued struggles under pressure. Guys, every season that we've covered college football together, even going back to when Quinn was in high school, we pointed to the fact that he really struggled with his footwork when he was under pressure. When his pocket collapsed, it seemed like he got happy feet. Not unique to Quinn. A lot of quarterbacks struggle with that. I mean, it's, self-preservation at that point. But the best quarterbacks find ways to navigate the pocket and step up. And a comparison I'll draw, and I referenced this on Twitter earlier, was CJ Stroud. 2 seasons ago, what did I tell you CJ needed to do to improve his draft stock and become the quarterback that Ohio State needed him to? He needed to improve his footwork. He needed to stop looking at the line of scrimmage and look downfield. And that's what he did in his final season in Columbus. If Quinn can find a way to do some of the same, which, it's obviously the second half of the season, I'm not really expecting that kind of improvement. He's dealing with injuries. There's a lot going on, but that's the missing ingredient to Texas being an elite team to me. Again, I felt like the offensive line got blitzkrieg. That was the first time that they had seen anything like an elite pass rush, and they struggled, which surprised me. But Quinn is going to have to find a way to stand tall in the pocket and step up to deliver to what is one of the best treasure trove wide receiver gambits in the country.
Yeah, that offensive line, that was one of the most surprising things about the game for me. There's a lot of NFL talent on that Texas offensive line, and they just were not up to the task on Saturday night. Garrett, I'll throw it back to you. What do you want to talk about? Your turn.
Man, I got to tell you what, there's one game, and I know that we don't necessarily have this on this little run sheet, but I have to shout them out because they're continuing to just throw zero respect. And I know they probably deserve to lose that game, but BYU found a way to survive and advance, and that game was one of the most fun games of the whole weekend. If you weren't staying up to the wee small hours of the morning, you missed out on a fantastic game. That was immaculate to watch Oklahoma State drive the field in 8 minutes and burn the fourth quarter clock to the ground, watching the air and the energy come out of that BYU stadium.
Yeah, wasn't it like 17 plays, 10 minutes or something like that?
When they got the ball, I remember this because I was talking to my wife about it and talking about like when I was getting up in the morning. I'm like, well, there's like 8 minutes, so I might see how this drive goes, and then head to bed, because 8 minutes could be short in football, but 8 minutes could also be really long. And I was like, well, I can't wait to the end of this drive because that's the end of the game now, I thought. So, watching them convert multiple fourth downs, watching them find a way to just grind out a win, Ollie Gordon going up over the pile and everything. That was a lot of fun, and that was seriously awesome to watch. And I'm sitting there with like a minute left on the clock and saying, well, BYU's in serious trouble. I'm gonna have to eat a little bit of crow on this one. I was out here, stumping for the Cougars and making sure I was out here saying, and then to watch Retzlaff go down. First off, the play that's not going to get the credit is that huge scramble that he took off on, fakes out the corner, kind of jukes him, and then takes on for another like 40 yards after that to get upfield, put himself in a position to make that throw and not have to heave up a Hail Mary, but actually throw it like an actual route combo, which set up that play. Obviously, a couple jukes there from Lassiter, and then he's in the end zone, and that was awesome. So just a fantastic finish to that game for BYU. The crowd pop was awesome. The different camera shots of it. There's one from the end zone where you can see the crowd going nuts in the background. Really, really fun, and I still think BYU is getting disrespected. I understand they struggled with Oklahoma State. I'm not really interested in that. I'm interested in 7-0, and I'm interested in watching these BYU Cougars continue to roll on.
Yeah, both of the undefeateds in the Big 12 had wild comeback wins, right? Iowa State as well, we mentioned off the top. Rocco Beck led a heck of a drive to steal that game back for the Cyclones as well. So both BYU and Iowa State remaining on top. And I just want to shout out Matt Campbell one more time. So many college coaches screw up time management at the end of the game. They screw up timeouts. They don't know simple math, and it pisses me off every time I see it. Matt Campbell put on a masterclass of how to use your timeouts when you're down at the end of the game. He used one after a first down conversion, but he knew he had the 2-minute timeout. So he used it on first down to keep it from going to the 2-minute timeout, then used his last two and let the 2-minute timeout be third down. Gave his team plenty of time to set up that game-winning drive. BYU's schedule going forward, guys, not that difficult. Definitely not as difficult as we once thought. They're at UCF, at Utah after a bye. Then they have Kansas at home, at Arizona State, and Houston at home to close out the regular season. In a vacuum, I'm not taking them to lose any of those games. I don't know that BYU is a 12-0 team, so they might stub their toe somewhere. We obviously saw them almost stub their toe against Oklahoma State. But in a vacuum, it's hard to pick against them in any of those games individually.
It is. And, the defense will probably be the best unit on the field in any of those matchups, right? I mean, gosh,
good defense.
Utah, I think, is probably the closest challenger to that. And they've still got a really solid defense, but the offense just cannot move the football. And so, yeah, it's getting harder and harder to exclude BYU from a trip to Arlington at this point.
The one thing I will say that on that defense they got to work on, Oklahoma State showed the model. For them, it's just, basically quick hitting plays, little slants, little screens, little running back flare outs, stuff like that. Because BYU plays such a zone, coverage type of thing, kind of squeezes down on you. If you can hit those quick hitters, you can sustain long drives. Now, it takes a high level of execution, and I don't know that there's, a whole lot of teams that can sustain that type of success over the course of, a long drive like what Oklahoma State did. But nonetheless, that is the formula, and I think that's going to be how a lot of teams try to attack BYU going forward. The good news, though, for BYU is they really don't give up the big play all that much. And so, if you're looking at this from a BYU perspective, if you can get through the rest of the schedule, there's some teams, waiting towards the end of the season, if we're talking, Big 12 championship or even beyond possibly, that you don't necessarily have to be too afraid of from a big play perspective. You can kind of go out there, body up, play your style of football, and hopefully get out of there with a win if you're the BYU Cougars.
I'm going to drop our playoff still alive graphic probably on Wednesday. And Mitch talked me into adding 2 more teams in the Big 12, or maybe even 3 more teams, just because they're mathematically still alive. But it is shaping up to look like BYU is going to be in Arlington, and then the winner of Farmageddon at the end of the year, Iowa State, Kansas State. That's looking like kind of a glorified Big 12 semifinal at this point. So can't wait for those games.
Holy War is going to be a lot of fun in a couple weeks. I'll say that much.
Which one?
Holy War with them in Utah.
Yeah, absolutely. If you talk and find an offense, I'll be excited for that game. But 13-7 against TCU was not
good. I watched that one sitting at the bar as well afterwards, and I was sitting next to a TCU fan for a little bit, and we were kind of chatting it up. So if you found the podcast, shout out to you, my friend. But not a fantastic year for the Frogs, and he wasn't super high on their chances this year.
TCU is one of the teams that Mitch talked me into putting on the graphic because they still only have 2 Big 12 losses. So if they can run the table, it's conceivable, I guess.
Well, my buddy at the bar at Choctaw Casinos and Resorts does not believe in the same thing, and I don't think he would like them being on the graphic. But hey, we can keep them on.
West Virginia is still going to be on there too.
Never say never.
We're not happy that they were on there last week, so it's going to be great. Mitch, give us one more quick one before we move on.
Yeah, Lincoln Riley, he is who we thought he was, guys. He blows another fourth quarter lead. And frankly, for my money, he should be done at USC. I believe he's got an $88 million buyout. I think that's right. Some high buyout numbers being floated around. So I want to make sure that's his number, but it's large. He's 2-9 in his last 11 one-score games at USC. He's also lost more games at USC in 2+ years than he did his entire 5-year tenure at Oklahoma. Now, say what you will about the state of Oklahoma when he took it over and the state of USC. It shouldn't matter. The talent that he has recruited to USC absolutely should have erased any excuse that he had to be losing these games, and losing a 14+ point lead in the fourth quarter to a Maryland team that just has nothing going for it right now. I don't know how people continue to make excuses for him. And I think if you look around Twitter, you're finally starting to see people jump on the bandwagon. Lincoln needs to go to the NFL. He needs to go do something else. But being the coach of the USC Trojans is not in that program's long-term health.
And he had a lot of built-in advantages when he was at Oklahoma. He had a program that Bob Stoops built from the ground up for over the course of like 20 years.
Mm-hmm.
And he had a conference that he was the tallest and biggest brand in that conference for the entire time that he was there. So it's really difficult to see him succeeding going forward. I totally agree with that. Just a huge, huge buyout number, though. I don't know what kind of money they've got on the West Coast to take care of that, but that's bigger than Jimbo Fisher's for context. Everyone likes to talk about Jimbo Fisher's buyout and how much A&M spent. That's almost $10 million more than what A&M spent to pay Jimbo Fisher.
And I don't think USC could get George Strait.
I don't think USC could get George Strait. They will have the Olympics in 2028, but I don't know.
Something.
That's something Brian College.
Those are notoriously cash drains, though. That's not a good, cash making opportunity for the Trojans.
Bryan College Station has the Games of Texas the next 2 years, and that will be a boon for the local economy in the summer, but it's not the Olympics. Garrett, real quick, one more before we move on.
Guys, I gotta ask a question real quick, and I want to kind of talk about this briefly. Is Alabama out? They're out, right? I don't think any of us would pick them to make the playoff, but realistically, they're probably out. And also, how many more losses do you think they sustain here? I want to read their schedule real quick. They've got Missouri this upcoming week, and then they get a bye week. Then it's at LSU, Mercer, obviously not going to drop to Mercer, at Oklahoma and Auburn. How many more losses on the schedule for Alabama? This is an absolute implosion. I picked Tennessee, by the way, so I feel a little bit validated in this.
That's off to you.
I thought that the running
You're the only one of us that did.
And maybe the only one in the country. I mean, everyone was picking Alabama. Everyone was, convinced. All the analytics pointed that way. I just looked at it and said they can't stop running quarterback, and they didn't exactly work out that way. Wasn't a whole lot of offensive sparks flying in either direction. But Alabama's got some stuff wrong with them. Do they lose this week to Missouri? Do they lose at LSU? What do we think of their schedule going out?
In a vacuum, I would pick them to lose at LSU right now. I think LSU is playing better football than them. And we've seen now both times that DeBoer has gone on the road in the SEC. Yes, he did win at Wisconsin, but both times he's gone on the road in the SEC, it has not ended well for him. Mm-hmm. Mizzou's tricky. Mizzou, I feel like their offense is just waiting to have a big week. And for whatever reason, they just haven't this season. I don't know why. They have the players. They have the quarterback. They have the receivers. They have decent offensive line talent, we thought, coming into the year. But is that against a struggling Alabama defense? Maybe. I'd be kind of surprised if they lost that one in Tuscaloosa. I think they're a 9-3 team. I think they lose to LSU. That's their only opportunity for a marquee win from here on out. They do have the Georgia win in the back pocket. So if they can go 10-2 or maybe even 9-3, if the right things break nationally, they have that Georgia win in the back pocket if Georgia keeps winning. But right now, I'd certainly bet on them not making the playoff if I was putting money on it.
Yeah, I said that was an elimination game in Knoxville, and you certainly lost the ability to control your destiny. So for my money, the way that the rest of the SEC is shaking out, and a lot can still change, but I do believe Alabama will be left out of the 12-team playoff.
Yeah, I personally think there's a better than not chance they lose the next 2 weeks. I mean, obviously not the bye, but they'll lose to Missouri and at LSU. I think Missouri, like you were saying, Trey, they're kind of waiting to happen. And this is also a Missouri team that's kind of fighting for their lives because, that lost A&M.
That's their one chance at a marquee win. They were looking at that and circling that and saying this is a must win if we want to make the college football playoff.
Yep, and if they want to be, they won't make it on 10-2. That's not what Missouri's going to do. If their two losses are A&M and Alabama, that's not going to make it at 10-2. So they know they need that 11-1, and then to start praying for things to break right so that they can find a way to Atlanta. But I think that's going to be a desperate Missouri team that's got to make something happen. And I don't think they win at LSU. I wouldn't pick them to do that right now. I guess we'll see how LSU looks the next couple of weeks. But guys, if that happens, that would be 4 out of 5 of the last games that they lose, which would be absolutely nuts to say about the Alabama Crimson Tide.
And not an indictment on the entire future of Kalen DeBoer, but just a step back from where Nick Saban
It's year one. And the thing that I thought about earlier, and this is kind of my last thing to say on it, is Alabama fans, welcome to college football. Even when you hire a guaranteed thing, it's still not a guaranteed thing, right? They hired the guy that just coached in the national championship game, and it's still not a guaranteed thing. It's not guaranteed you're going to have success year one. You can have stud players, you can return talent, and still, after all that, it can still end up going poorly. And it's not every day that you can go hire Nick Saban.
Guys, I'll say one last thing before we move on to some bracketology. Do we need to instill a draft selective service for officials in this country? Like, I know that I don't want to make this political, but if I was running for president, I think that'd be on my platform. Like,
Do you
when
mean to
you
say
turn
that we should
18,
draft officials first if we were to draft people? Because
Yeah, I need explanation here.
I just
I'm
think
actually on board with that. The officials are terrible.
if we are at a time of peace as a nation, I think selective service should maybe shift to officials, and we might be able to find some guys that can do a better job, because it's getting ridiculous. It's getting absolutely ridiculous. I mentioned it on the live show on Sunday morning, just the abomination we saw in Austin and the terrible precedent that was set by caving to a fan base that was throwing crap on the field. And you can't tell me that they didn't sneak a peek at the Jumbotron and be like, oh, yeah, we screwed that one up when you should overturn this one on something that's not reviewable. Like, just man up, own the bad call, move on. Everyone will move on. It's just, and that's not even mentioning the A&M Mississippi State game. I'm obviously biased in that one, but that was just an atrociously officiated game. We see it week in and week out. There's just awful calls and stuff that should be so simple if you just do it by the book. And I'm saying that from my couch. Maybe I should get in there and referee a game. Maybe you'll see me on Saturdays in a couple weeks, guys. I'll be out there with a microphone.
Well, and it's obvious to point the finger at Texas, but I even brought it up last week. We got to look at the stuff at Miami. Another interesting call this week with that Louisville game, and something that could have affected the outcome late in the fourth quarter. Color me shocked. Again, I'm not going to call the conspiracy theories out completely, but like, this is why you need some kind of national officiating thing as opposed to conference officiating, because there's just too many things.
Absolutely.
There's too many things that can go wrong. There's too many things there's too many conflicts of interest. And, there's already stories about who the ref at Austin was and who he might've had connection to. We just don't need it, right? Go get yourself some national officials, go get guys from the other side of the country that have no interest in your game whatsoever to call your games. It should be that easy.
And pay them money.
Please.
Like, pay them a livable wage. Because I don't know if most people know this, these people have day jobs. They are not full-time officials. They are teachers. They are lawyers. They are fill in the blank, police officers, firefighters. Like, they have day jobs because they are not being paid enough. The fact that we have this much money in college football and we don't pay officials to be full-time, livable wages is just ridiculous. But go ahead, Mitch.
Well, I was going to say the last point on this is, I think transparency is a must. We've got live gambling happening now in college sports, and you are allowing the gatekeepers of all honesty and integrity to be in the hands of a weekend part-timer. That is ridiculous. A $1 billion industry is in the hands of, like you said, a teacher. That just cannot be allowed. There has to be some sort of actual functioning rules and regulations here. Shocker, the NCAA didn't think of that ahead of time. Shocker that it's the Wild West. I mean, it's the same story, different verse. But right now, I mean, our officiating works about as well as FTX's financial department. I mean, it's all being run on QuickBooks off of lone Mac in the back corner. It's a bad scene for college sports. And if it's not fixed relatively soon, you will have a scandal sooner rather than later. I mean, everyone is only human. These guys are not making money, livable wages off of this. There will be somebody that is on the take eventually. And when it gets exposed, it's going to destroy part of the foundation of college sports, whatever college sports is nowadays. But the door is wide open for that type of thing to happen, not just cracked, which is beyond concerning.
Absolutely. And you gotta have something that would be missed if it was taken away through corruption, right? And right now they just don't have that. Let's transition, guys. Enough bashing refs. Let's all sign up to be refs. You guys want to do that? We'll start at the high school level. We've
been thinking about this wrong. We're trying to get credentialed to games. We should just officiate.
We should just officiate.
This makes sense.
Guys, been there, done that. I don't really want to go back.
Let's transition to some playoff bracketology, guys, because this week was, like I said off the top, a seismic week when it comes to playoff implications. We like to talk about the games themselves first and then move into bracketology later. Did you guys know, I learned this today, the first college football playoff rankings come out on November 5th.
That's probably the only thing that's happening that night.
Yeah,
What
it's
else
the
is
only
happening
thing
that
that's
night?
happening the first Tuesday in November, right? There's nothing else that our nation might be.
No. Actually, no, I remember there's a MAC football going on that night.
There is. That's right. That's the
yeah,
debut
that's
of
what it is.
Maction.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. There we go.
God
All right.
bless America.
Let's do some bracketology. I'd love to see the ratings comparison of those 3 events, I guess.
This is going to be ratings are up here. Playoffs come out. All the news channels dip. And they come back like 10 minutes later.
All right, Garrett, can you hit the switch to screen share for me? Because I do not remember which one it is. There it is, right there. All right, let's start at the top, guys. Let's start with conference champions. And in the 1 seed, I think the Big Ten champion will take the 1 seed. But my question is, who will the Big Ten champion be? Obviously, right now, we want to kind of take resume plus projecting forward. Are you guys expecting Oregon and Ohio State to play in the Big Ten championship game? Just quick yes or no.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. So then neutral field in Indianapolis, Indiana, who would you take right now, Ohio State or Oregon?
I've said it since the preseason. I picked Oregon to win in Autzen. Obviously backed out of that the week of, but Oregon to win at Autzen, Ohio State to get revenge and take the 1 seed. So I'll ride with the Buckeyes on neutral field.
Okay.
I'm going to flip a coin and make Trey finish this one because I'd actually maybe lean Ducks right now.
Okay.
Like maybe just a little bit. Like I don't really have a massive reason why, but I just think that they're playing a little bit more complete, maybe finding their stride. Could have been a late bloomer, and I think I'm excited to see how the season kind of finishes out for them. But I think right now I might lean Oregon.
Well, I'll be the tiebreaker. I'll take the Buckeyes as well. Dan Lanning's loophole is now closed, so I don't know how he's going to win that game on a neutral field. Just kidding.
Fair enough.
I do think on a neutral field, Ohio State will be favored, so I'll use that as the tiebreaker for right now. I'm going to spell it correctly. 2 seed, SEC champion. We go in Georgia after what they did in Austin. Or are we putting someone else in? Because it's A&M LSU in the driver's seat right now.
I think it's Georgia at this point. I mean, you can project forward and make a case for 4 or 5 other teams, quite honestly. It truly, I think, is going to be who's playing hot football in November and who can roll into Atlanta with steam. But it seems like Georgia's errors are easier to correct than maybe Texas, just depending on what Quinn Ewers, ends up being the rest of the season. So I did have the Bulldogs as number 2.
Okay, Garrett?
I'm fine with that as a pick. I will say SEC champion should go here, but I have almost no idea who that's going to be just based on paths and play. Like you could legitimately make a case for me that it could be Texas, Georgia, A&M, LSU, Tennessee could still have a path. Like there's a lot of teams that have a path to their heck. Missouri's got 1 conference loss. So like there's a path for a lot of teams right now. I'm fine with it being Georgia just because they have the kind of the proven pedigree. They have the big win over Texas right now. So I think I may have the most confidence that they make it to Atlanta just based on tiebreak scenarios. So I guess that statistically makes them most likely, but I would not be shocked if this goes one of 5 or 6 ways.
Oh yeah. And I think we're going to have just a log jam at the top that's going to take it. I wrote this a couple weeks ago, I think, or I might have said it on the podcast. It's going to make the Supreme Court in Bush versus Gore 2000 look like a kindergarten class choosing a book. That log jam at the top and who gets to go to Atlanta is going to be ridiculous. I'll go with Georgia in the 2 seed for right now.
We're forgetting one team, right? I was told that the Sooners would be in this discussion come late October and early November. Does anybody have an update on Oklahoma football?
I have the update, and it's that I went back to that video, and I talked so much mess in the comments back. I don't even care. Like y'all were saying, Oklahoma fans, y'all said some of the most egregious things to us on that podcast. You're absolutely going to take your medicine back. I don't care. Mitch, I'm right there with you.
Man, my dog is right there with you guys too. We gotta get.
She's like, "Shut up, Oklahoma."
We gotta get a muzzle on her for live shows, man. I'll talk over her. 3 seed's gonna be the ACC champ, I think. I'll let you guys talk about the ACC champ while I console my dog.
I don't know which way you lean. I'm maybe going to lean Miami right now just because the ACC has a desire to make them win for some reason. But I would maybe lean Miami right now.
Yeah, I can't argue against Miami because at a certain point, on one side, you could say, boy, it feels like Miami's getting lucky. Boy, it feels like Miami's playing with fire. On the other end, though, they haven't lost yet. And those kind of close scrapes, those find a way to win moments, they build on each other and they build a team. Winning is a skill. We've talked about that. And Miami's really good at finding a way to win in a variety of ways. So I've got Clemson. They were my preseason pick to win the ACC. But if you told me the Canes are number 3, that's perfectly fine.
I think Clemson's
they should both make it.
I think Clemson's a better team, but Miami has like that whole everything goes right for them. So I'm not willing to say they're quite team of destiny vibes, but they have that sort of sense to them this year.
I will tie break this time and go to Miami. Wow. I will tie break this time.
And Dolly agrees.
Let's mark that so we can edit out the podcast audio. But I'll go with Miami. I went to Mitch last time. I think I would pick Miami right now on a neutral field over Clemson, so I'll use that as a tiebreaker as well. Big 12 champion. I'm gonna stand on a table for Kansas State. They have looked a lot better. I know they lost to BYU head-to-head in Provo. I think Avery Johnson looks a lot better than he did in that game, and I'm going to stand on a table for Kansas State.
If Trey's busy, Garrett, if Iowa State runs a table, they go 12-0, but they lose to Kansas State in the Big 12 title game, does Iowa State then make the playoff with one loss? Like with that, is that the only way that the Big 12
I think that the Big 12 champion makes the playoff. I think that's what happens. I don't really see another path. And there's a chance I think that we're actually 3-way split here because I was going to pick BYU to win the whole thing. And so I think we're probably 3-way split on the Big 12 champ, but I don't see a path. So like obviously Kansas State's kind of in the low pole position right now. I think if Iowa State were to end up there against Kansas State having the split wins, but not having won the title for the Big 12, I don't know that they make it in because I think there's enough 1 or 2 loss teams that probably end up in a position where their resume is a little bit better, even though I guess technically Iowa State would have victory over Big 12 champion in that last game of the season. So I'm not.
And you got to take it. Farmageddon's the last week of the season. Is that right, Trey?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, November 30th. Yeah.
So actually that scenario can't happen because if Iowa State wins, then Kansas State will be eliminated.
But it would take multiple losses from BYU or something like that. So
guys, I think the Big 12 is a one-bid league.
I think it's just the champion. Yeah.
I think it's the champion only getting in as the 4 seed. I think the ACC is going to take
you're saying that Kansas State beats them in Farmageddon and then goes on to win and makes it in as the one loss. Okay.
Yeah, that's where I'm at right now. It's in Ames. I know that's going to be difficult. That's going to be rocking if Iowa State is still undefeated or even has 1 loss because it'll still be a play-in game. But where I'm at right now with what I've seen from Kansas State, they just look like a force right now. But I will defer to the current AP poll if you guys want to just put the clones in as a placeholder because I think they're ranked higher than BYU, right?
Yes,
I believe so. My pick for this is BYU, but y'all are more than welcome to overrule me on that one. I understand I'm kind of out here on BYU Island by myself, so I'll wait for y'all.
I keep expecting BYU to stub their toe.
That does make sense, and I totally understand that. There just is something. I was talking about Miami having Team of Destiny vibes. BYU is Team of Destiny. Like they're just not.
Miami, at least when you look at the efficiency graphs that come out on Monday mornings, is like way up here, and BYU is usually in the negative.
Which is why they're Team of Destiny. They just keep winning.
They are winning off of vibes right now.
The football gods want them to win.
All right, we're just gonna put Big 12 champ in the.
You can put Iowa State.
I'm gonna put Iowa State just because they are tops in the AP poll right now. 5 seed. What are we thinking? I think it's the Big 10 championship loser, so I'm inclined to go Oregon here.
Oregon.
Okay, Oregon, followed probably by the SEC championship game loser, depending on who makes that. Right now, I don't have the AP poll in front of me, but I'm thinking this is probably Texas range. This is probably pick your SEC team range for me.
I've got Texas at number 6 in my projection. I just don't see them losing another game. unless something special happens in College Station. But I think this is an 11-1 Longhorn team that makes it to the SEC championship.
This is another one of those spots that highly depends on tiebreakers because Texas could, I suppose, win out, but you also have to consider the LSU aspect of this. Is LSU, if they beat A&M in College Station and then run the table on the way out, they would meet Georgia. I believe they meet Georgia. I think that's how that works. Is the
I have no idea, honestly.
But that's where
I'm
like
waiting for someone else to write that article.
Well, and like when me and Mitch did this a couple weeks ago, we had to go back and forth on the SEC team so much because there's so many different scenarios in the SEC, which you could all legitimately see happening. So I think this game with A&M and LSU is a fairly pivotal one this season because that will give us kind of who gets that inside pole position for the SEC. And I think fast tracks that team towards the playoff, and the other team might drop out of the playoff race altogether.
Yeah, could definitely see that. I think here we should probably just list off a bunch of teams on the side and then rank them in order. What do you guys think about that?
Sounds good to me.
Okay,
if it's helpful to provide a list, so I workshop this on my own. So I have Miami at 7, which is the ACC runner-up. So Miami, or it could be Clemson here.
Clemson,
Penn State. I mean, they probably drop a game to
They're going to be 11-1.
Yeah, to Ohio State.
We'll go ahead and put Penn State at 7.
That makes sense.
Okay. So Penn State, Notre Dame probably is an 11-1 team. I don't see them missing the playoffs, so I've got them at 9. And then, guys, I mean, pick your order. I put Indiana, the winner of the LSU Texas A&M game, and then Boise State. They're my G5 representative.
I don't disagree with Boise State. I think Boise State as the G5 representative
is Boise State the 12 seed?
Well, not necessarily. I mean,
that's what I'm asking. Like, do you project them sliding in at 12, or do you think they can make it up above that?
I do think if they an 11-1 and then a 12-1 Mountain West champ, I do think the way everything is going right now, I think Indiana in this situation makes it with 1 loss. Texas A&M or LSU makes it with 2
You have to throw
losses.
Tennessee on the list as well because Tennessee is right up there.
Tennessee could be there. I just have a hard time believing that a Boise State team, very good Boise State team, but a Boise State team would be slotted ahead of a 2-loss, SEC team, depending on where those losses are.
They'll have to be, in order to be not 12, I think they have to be one of those top 4 seeds. And they're going to have to be like, better than whatever the Big 12 champ is or better than whatever the ACC champ is. When we did this a couple weeks ago, that looked likely. Now, not as much. A couple teams have separated themselves from the pack. So I'm fine slotting Boise State in at 12 and just saying that's how they get there.
Well, and right now they're at 17 in the AP poll, which doesn't mean anything for the playoff standings. Remember, I mean, this top 25 list goes completely out the window once we get to the playoff seeding. But I do think that might be a little bit of a pulse of the public sentiment on the Broncos.
Right now, for me personally, if Notre Dame can get to 11-1, I think they'll be an 8 seed.
I can agree with that, yeah.
So if we're projecting Notre Dame at 11-1, I'm going to slot them in at 8 and hosting.
And I would be good with Clemson at 9 just because I do think if Clemson is your ACC runner-up, that probably means that's a 1-loss team.
Yeah, the only thing that I think might go against them is if their resume in this scenario is 11-2 and losing to
1 loss in conference, just to be clear. But Georgia
losing to Georgia and Miami.
Yeah.
Right. And I think that might be held against them just because the fatigue of having already seen them against 2 teams. It depends on how close they are against Miami. If they get blown out against Miami, that could be a problem. I don't foresee that though. So I'm fine with them going in at 9 and being a road first-round team. So now it's really just pick your poison here for these last 2. If Indiana is truly 11-1, and Mitch, if you're standing for an 11-1 Indiana and ready to back that bandwagon, they're going to be in the playoff.
I'm to the point. I'm not trying to claim any prediction here with Indiana. I mean, Trey, you were the one that was hyping them up. I'm thrilled.
I wasn't hyping them as 11-1 though, and I'm still kind of waiting for the other shoe to drop.
Well, and the other shoe to drop may be Curtis Rourke being hurt for an undisclosed amount of time, right? Like we don't know. I think it's Taven Jackson who's going to take over as quarterback.
He looked good in the second half. He looked really good.
He did, and Cignetti's offense rolls on. So I think Indiana does lose a game, but tell me where they lose the second game. I think there's a really good chance that they're 11-1 and in the playoff, which is bonkers to say out loud.
Yeah,
I can't disagree with that.
I'm right there with you. We'll put them in at the 10 seed. And then we have a conundrum here at 11.
This is the problem with trying to do this now is you have a bunch of SEC teams at the end of the season.
It's going to get sorted out. It's going to get sorted out. You guys are absolutely right. And, look, if we put A&M in, they get to go to Austin. That's fantastic.
So that's going to happen then. Put anytime the playoff gets a chance to match these two up, that's what's going to happen. So it doesn't matter if LSU even wins that game. The committee wants to find a way to put A&M there.
All right, let's make the tiebreaker here. Let's not even worry about the future. Who has the best win out of these? We can keep Missouri in for grins and giggles, but LSU, A&M, and Tennessee, who has the best resume to date?
Well, I gotta pull up LSU's schedule.
It's gonna be A&M because the loss is the best loss right now. Tennessee losing to Arkansas is a glaring mistake. LSU losing to USC is a mistake. And I don't think because the problem is each of these teams have looked really good and really bad.
Yep.
So there have been moments where these teams have looked like world beaters, and there have been moments where these teams have looked like they were lucky to escape.
Yep.
I think right now the best win is probably what A&M did to Missouri, but also I could be convinced that it was LSU over Ole Miss, even though I know that LSU
over Alabama.
Tennessee over Alabama is a good one, though. I don't know how much.
See, I'm out on Alabama. This is easy for me. It's LSU's win over Ole Miss.
I think it's LSU's win over Ole Miss.
I think in the way they found a way to win at South Carolina, the way that they bludgeoned Arkansas. I think right now you have to pick LSU. If we're just doing resumes, there's holes in both sides, like Garrett said, but I would pick on a blind resume contest. I would pick LSU right now.
I want to point out that Ole Miss isn't in this group that we're talking about, and Missouri is, and one of those games was escaped, and one of those games was a thrashing. So
I know that Ole Miss should probably be in that extra list that I made. They're still in it, and if they won out, they'd be 10-2. If they win out, they're 10-2.
I guess,
and they would have a win over Georgia, but I don't foresee that happening.
Right.
Yeah.
I guess it just kind of depends. This weekend truly is going to be seriously impressive because the best win on either of these teams' resume is going to happen on Saturday.
Yeah.
That's what's going to happen is one of these teams is going to get a massive signature win, and the other team, for all intents and purposes, will be out of pole position to make the playoff.
Absolutely. All right, guys, let's close out our show tonight by talking about some midweek menu. We'll go through these pretty quickly. We do have some bangers in the midweek this week, though, so I'm really excited to get your takes on some of these games. All right, we got CUSA action on Tuesday and Wednesday. Check that out if you're so inclined. We're not going to preview it on here, but we do love Conference USA for all the craziness that it provides. We're going to skip ahead to Thursday where we've got Syracuse at Pitt. Panthers, 6-point favorites. Over under is 61.5. So Vegas is expecting a ton of points. Both teams are coming off of a bye. Not so stellar performances before the bye, but they did get some wins. But this might be one of the most entertaining games of the whole week, guys.
I think it is. I counted Pitt out at the beginning of the year. I did not expect them to be here. Eli Holstein has performed admirably this year, but it does feel like opposing defenses are figuring out how to cover him a little bit more than what Syracuse has going on. So I'll take Syracuse plus the 6. Kyle McCord has looked very solid this year. He's got the experience that Eli Holstein just frankly doesn't have, and it's not his fault. He's a redshirt freshman quarterback, but I'm going to roll with the orange here. I like I like what they can do on offense more than I do Pitt can do.
Yeah, I'm going to rock with Pitt to win this one, but I don't think by the 6. I do think that they'll end up scoring enough points to win this one, but I definitely see the Thursday opportunity for this game to be kind of a back and forth and a weird something and a bounce of the ball that turns into a bunch of highlights that we're talking about and a blocked punt and all that other stuff like that turns into a really tight back and forth game. But I do think Pitt is going to come out on top on this one. I'm just not going to bet against the 10th ranked scoring offense right now. I'm going to go with the offense that scores points and makes offense go burr.
Syracuse somehow lost to Stanford earlier this year, but other than that, they've just found multiple ways to win. So I'm with you, Garrett. I don't know that this is going to end Pitt's perfect season, but Pitt does seem like a team that's ready to lose a game at some point, with all due respect to what they've done so far this year. Give me Syracuse and the points in a weird Thursday night game. Let's jump ahead. Also on Thursday, I'll just drive by this one real quick. Shout out Georgia Southern, knocking off James Madison and putting yourselves in the driver's seat in the Sun Belt East. A lot of you guys were really excited that your logo was included on the graphic for playoff teams that are still alive, and you validated it by knocking off James Madison. James Madison, unfortunately, will have to wait till next year to try to make the playoff. Friday nights, oh, baby. We got Boise State, the Fighting Ashton Gentees, 2.5-point favorites at UNLV. We're probably going to get this game twice. It's one we've been circling for weeks. Over-under, guys, is 65.5. Offense galore. I'll ask you guys, over-under 600 combined rushing yards between these two teams, because, boy, do they love to run the ball.
I'm going to go over on the rushing yards number because I think this is probably the first chance that we'll see a complete game of effort from Genty, because he'll have to, right? They're going to probably go back and forth in this one. There's probably going to be a whole bunch of points in this one. And, just because of the nature of this game, I think they're going to need Genty every step of the way in this one. I don't think they pull away in this one. And then just get to sit him in the second half or sit him for the fourth quarter or something like that. So give me all the rushing yards. Give me all the points. I would pick Boise to win this one. I will be staying up until 9:30 Central Time here to be able to watch this one kick off, and then staying up for the rest of the night. Last week it was the BYU Oklahoma State game, and this week it's going to be Boise and UNLV.
I've got Boise winning this game. I will say, though, shout out to UNLV. They have the 20th best ranked rushing defense in the country, and it's not like they've played a bunch of nobodies. They've stopped Kansas. They've stopped Fresno State that tries to run the ball, Syracuse, Oregon State as well earlier in the season, or last week, I should say, in a 33-25 win. So I do have the Broncos winning, but I am very excited to see how UNLV handles this. They're at home this time. Should be a raucous environment for the Mountain West game of the year.
Yeah, and should be a lot of fun. Obviously, like the highlight game, I think, of that Friday night, and best G5 game of the year, and so it's going to be a lot of fun. Trey had to take off for a second, and so we'll kind of close it out here. But Mitch, Rutgers at USC is kind of that last game that was highlighted. This game kicks off 11 o'clock Eastern time, and so if we're talking about just staying up late to watch some football, this is one you could choose to watch if you wanted to, but two teams not necessarily playing as well as a lot of people expected them to coming into the year. Do you have a leaning in this game? Are we just going to hate on Lincoln Riley, or what are we doing here?
If I had to bet this, I would take the points just because I don't trust USC. I don't really trust Rutgers anymore. Unfortunately, that hype train has just ground to a halt. The defense has forgotten to show up these past couple weeks. They gave up 50 plus to Wisconsin. They made UCLA look like they knew what they were doing offensively. This past week in a loss to the Bruins, their first win in the Big Ten, by the way. So I'll take the points, but yeah, weird body clock game for Rutgers, but I just don't trust USC. So I think the more likely scenario is USC finds a way to run away with this, but then again, we haven't really seen them run away with much after that.
It really hasn't been a fantastic year for them, and I think, maybe this is a place where USC steps up and says, hey, this is my chance to make a statement. And we've been hearing the hate and we've been hearing all the criticism, and we're going to come out here and blitz Rutgers. I just don't buy that. I really don't think that's I don't think that's really a great option. I don't think that's a likely option in this game. But there is the point that Rutgers going across the country may fall victim to that Big Ten cross-country thing where teams are like, like 3-12 or something when they travel across the country. It's some kind of crazy negative stat there where teams just aren't winning when they cross the country. So maybe that's Rutgers. I don't really know. I can tell you I'm probably not staying up to the finish of this one. It'll probably get ugly, and I'll go to bed one way or the other. So that's kind of my take on this one. I'm going to be too busy watching good football at Las Vegas.
All right, well, let's wrap it there. Trey had to step out, so we'll close down the show for him. Appreciate you guys watching live. If you're listening to the podcast after the fact, as Trey said, we do this every Monday night, 7:30 p.m. Central. We'd love to have you join the live stream. And, of course, our Week 9 preview will come out on Thursday morning. We'll do the live show on Saturday night to break down another great slate of college football action. So, for Trey Reeves and Garrett Turney, I'm Mitch Mason. Thanks so much for hanging out with us. Until the preview, so long, everybody.
Gracious him. How about